So if one looks at that and says, where's New Zealand? What's our position at the moment? Somewhat fragile. We're dealing with a major issue. We have to deal with it. We support dealing with it. We would find difficulty sustaining another shock, and we certainly wouldn't be prepared if the world had another shock. So we need to reflect on that, and we need to think about how we're going to address it. Otherwise, we're really carry significant risk.
That is a very vulnerable position that you're saying we're in at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a vulnerable position, but I don't want to overstate it, because personally I think that we've actually, we're heading into better territory than we've been through. We've come through a very risky period, but if we don't use having come through that as a reality check that exposes the risks that we face, then we deserve the future that we'll get otherwise.
So what are the
that can be the same as our attitude towards our buildings and earthquakes. I'm guilty of being not serious enough about them. And the tragedy that's befallen in Christchurch is something we all need to take to heart and say, hey, this is where we live, and there's some responsibilities that come with that knowledge and the ability to do something about them.
So what are the key things that you think New Zealand needs to be doing, given we are in this vulnerable position at the moment?
I think we have to function. Sustainability is a good word, actually. Sustainability is a hackneyed word. Someone was telling me the other day that sustainability in terms of the green world, or the response to climate change, is no longer as pertinent as it was, and I don't think that's true, actually. I think if we took sustainability as a key word, we have to work out how we can become sustainable. So sustainability is about longevity. So it means that you come through ups and downs. So in terms of our balance sheet, we need to have a balance sheet that can handle ups and downs, be they from world financial markets, or be they from dealing with issues that are particular to New Zealand, such as the earthquake. To have a balance sheet that can take ups and downs, you have to have a long-term view that not she'll be right, or we're okay as long as nothing goes wrong. You need to actually have some padding in it, and that means that you don't risk too much in any particular way. So if, for example, as we rely on international banking, we make sure that our own financial system is as strong and independent as it can be, without reliance on someone else's system. So yes, we have a connection with it, yes, we benefit from it, but we make sure that in the event that there are problems with that banking system, that we're able to deal with it. In terms of being able to deal with tragedies, immense tragedies such as happened in Christchurch, we have to build retained earnings or savings that enable us to do so. So that means that a sort of simplistic savings regime as we've had historically, which is borrowing internationally and building homes, doesn't work, because that relies on rising prices, which are not sustainable unless living standards are there to support rising prices locally, or international borrowings are there forever, neither of which is the case in New Zealand. And as a savings regime, for all of those people who thought that it's good enough to save in your house alone, the tragedy in Christchurch is a wake-up call for them as well. So if we're going to earn, we need to learn how to make businesses internationally internationally successful and competitive. And we need, as a country, to encourage businesses to do that. So getting our capital markets supported on a long-term basis, respecting the role that they play, encouraging business success, encouraging international business performance and scale is something that we need to come to grips with. Being good in our regulations, so that regulation is not just a stick but as a carrot and a stick, respecting regulation, so not having a free market policy which really is benefiting some and not all. It's getting the balances right. It's achievable. New Zealanders aren't good at change, but it's possible out of this sort of situation that will happen.
A couple of points to pick up on that you've raised there. You talked about our banking system. Obviously, I think it's about 92% of our banking assets are held by Australian-owned banks. Do you think we need to do, you touched on our having a strongly independent banking system, I guess Reserve Bank overseeing them. Do you think we need to do more on that front? And secondly, in terms of the capital markets, we've got with NZX, obviously you were involved back in the day when Mark Weldon came on board and there was talk of a merger with Australia. Australia is now looking to merge with Singapore. Is that a route we should still avoid in terms of our share market? And will the potential part floats of some of our SOEs be a saviour for the NZX?
Well, there's a lot of questions there. Well, the first one was the banking system. The first thing is Australia was lucky in the last GFC. And that's good, because as a result of that, New Zealand was lucky. So we were lucky that Australia was lucky, that the Australian banks were resilient as a result of their own economic conditions. We were lucky because those Australian banks were supportive of New Zealand, and I think we relied very much on them. In recent years, I think Alan Bollard's done a very good job to ensure that there's more local accountability for those banks. It's not good enough for us to rely on the goodwill of Australia. Those banks do very well here. They earn a very good return on capital, and they deserve it to the extent that they've been here for a long time and have been very committed to New Zealand. But we can't afford that to change. So making sure that they are institutionalised as New Zealand operations with capital and priority for New Zealand is quite critical, and with management and boards who reflect that local position. So on an ongoing basis, that's very important, and over a period of time, levels of savings within the banking system and outside the banking system are quite important. So there's further work to be done in those areas. In terms of the NZX, I don't think people really understand that it's pretty much a digital system, whether the NZX exists in New Zealand or whether it's part of the Australian or the ASX or the Singapore Stock Exchange. The real competition in markets for companies is actually what the ASX does. There's many people who talk about the NZX lacking competition when in fact it faces enormous competition. It faces competition with an underperforming economy that doesn't deliver many companies that are worth investing in, and certainly not many growth companies. Once companies get to a very large scale, there isn't the capital here, and they need to seek support from offshore markets, and in many cases those companies are either taken over as a result of not having continued capital support, or they move their head offices, and there's a very big loss to New Zealand that can result from that. The NZX is intimately connected as part of international capital markets, and my own belief is that if it became part of the ASX, it would do very little, if any good, for any New Zealand companies. Probably increase pressure for those companies to move their head offices. And I think that people really underestimate the risks of people involved around head offices, either directly as employees or as people supporting those offices. The IP that goes with those companies is far bigger and wider in its impact than people realise. So I would be very disappointed if some of the I guess they're naive short-termers continued on that line and had some sort of impact, but I doubt that they will.
And just in terms of the government's idea of partially floating